Yeah.
All right,
So
Val.
yep.
So thank you everyone for being so patient. I will hand things over to Justine because we have lost a bit of time. So we'll get back to it and enjoy the panel.
Okay, well, thank you, Ali. So welcome back. It's nice when we can all hear each other. It makes a panel that much more effective, I think, when we can empathetically listen and listen with gratitude. Now, I wanted to just say that because we did lose a tiny bit of time, maybe we could just quickly start again with you, John, and just a quick overview of who you are and really giving people context as to why we're together today as a group of professionals to talk about something as important as DEI.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to be participating on this panel. One of the things that I pointed out to, well, literally everybody that's also sitting here is the fact that I'm honestly in awe. I don't know completely what it is that I professionally bring to the table with respect to DEI over and beyond the kind of obvious components of my national insurance background. What you don't see is something that has been challenging me a lot over the course of the last decade, and that is that I am a disabled individual. All right, I have a visible disability, but I am disabled nevertheless, and it's significant enough that it creates some really, really strong problems and issues for me, both professionally as well as personally. All that being said, I've found that sometimes been incredibly challenging for myself to share with others the specifics of the issue. But once I do, many people try to empathize and try to accommodate. I found by giving people the opportunity to understand my situation, them the opportunity to be able to make changes for themselves, make changes for me, and that ultimately winds up creating a better relationship and better interaction for the both of us. The challenge is that in many instances, I'm too scared, to be honest, too scared to actually bring forward my particular issue and let them know about it. That fear is predicated from many, many years of cultural upbringing, the way that society treats people who are disabled, at least my perception of the way that society has treated people who are disabled are changing, but it's a change that needs to be enacted on both sides. It's not just from the perspective of others who need to be able to perceive and work with me. I also have to be able to make changes. I have to give them the opportunity. And if I don't share with them, they'll never know. And there will be no opportunity for making any type of change at all. That's a little bit about my personal background. HR, which is obviously what many of us are doing here. Doing it 30 years now. Good Lord, I'm starting to feel really old. But I love what I do. I find that I'm able to contribute very effectively, and I'm able to contribute even more effectively. Once again, if I share with others some of my challenges, we integrate and build in techniques and applications to accommodate and think, move on, and it just becomes the way we conduct ourselves and moves a lot easier for all of us. That's about all I can at the moment.
I very much appreciate that. Dawn did not indicate in the intro that I am also a person with disabilities. I have multiple sclerosis, was diagnosed 20 years ago. And so I very much appreciate you sharing and the courage with which you open that up. And particularly for the beginning of this panel, I think that's what we're really here to do, is talk about how we live D&I ourselves within our cultures and within our communities, and how as leading professionals in an HR role, how you bring some of your own personal experience into the more technical, policy-driven, measurement-oriented aspects. But it's truly the culture that I think we're going to really delve into today. So thank you so much, John. Maybe Ingrid, would you like to go next?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thank you, John and Justine, for sharing. So like John, I've been in the HR and inclusivity space for probably about 30 years. Like John, I'm going to say I'm still on a journey. There's always more to learn. Um, I'm always more to share. So I really appreciate being here with this panel and talking about how we, in our roles as professionals and as human beings, can help everyone around us understand what everybody brings to the table, and as they walk through life, and how we can all start from a common place and build relationships, as John said. So thank you for having me here.
Thank you. Perhaps Anna, would you like to share with us?
Sure. Sorry. Good morning, everybody. I'm really thrilled to be here. All I really want to share is when John asked me to participate on this panel, I kind of questioned him as to what I could possibly bring to this discussion because I'm pretty early on in my journey as well. I head up people operations at Palmerex, and we're on our own journey, but I'm on my journey personally as well. And I was really humbled that he felt that I had something of value to contribute. And I think all I really hope to do today is share my own learnings, my own stumbles, because there have been many. And with that, hopefully open up the space for some of those conversations and share kind of my courage and my bravery on this journey because cancel culture is real, and sometimes it really silences us because we're not sure what to say or what to share. And I'm hoping to help kind of shatter some of that fear that is pretty predominant in society today.
Wonderful. Thank you. And Allison.
Thank you. Thank you, Justine, and thank you, everybody. Like the rest of my fellow panelists, I was so humbled and surprised when I was invited to join the panel. I was very excited, given the opportunity to share what I've been working with Green Shields and working on. And but I'm still, like many of us, still learning a lot along the way. But I'm very happy to share the journey I've come to so far and the continuation we have planned as personally and professionally, and where we're kind of going from here. So thank you.
Thank you. And maybe because we've sort of ended with you talking, you mentioned Green Shield Canada, and I wondered if you could maybe talk and kick us off a little bit. We've all used some words that I find really interesting. We've talked about feeling humbled. We've been very open, courageous, authentic. We talk about fear. Now, when new initiatives are launched in companies, I worked for BMO for 27 years. So I have to say that, we would launch certain new things. And as we all know, everyone that's listening and participating, we have a lot of metrics. We hold ourselves accountable to certain very hard, crunchy forms of data. But there is fear because we don't know, are we really impacting and making change? And I know that there's a new gender affirmation offering at Green Shield Canada. And I imagine it took a lot of courage. There's probably a lot of fear around launching something like that. I personally don't really understand what that all means. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about both the technical, but also the emotional experience of working on something like that and what it's meant to Green Shield.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm happy to talk about that. The gender affirmation product was very much a passion project for me personally. It was something that I was very excited to be given the opportunity to work on with my other colleagues. All felt the same, but it was a very long process, and we wanted to make sure we were doing it right. But I'll begin just kind of to talk a little bit about the background of it. So the intent was to create a flexible benefit that would assist with some of the costs associated with transitioning. Since not all provinces are equal in coverage, the benefit fills in those provincial gaps and will allow individuals to use their maximums towards surgeries or procedures that best suits their journey. During some of our research, we found that individuals were moving provinces so they wouldn't be so out of pocket to feel that they could begin their journey to become the most authentic selves. And we really wanted to work on bridging that and finding an opportunity to try to suit their needs. So it was essential to us to not only work on this benefit, but to make it a standard benefit instead of one that employers opt into. We wanted to make it was part of the package, and an employer would have to make the choice to remove it from the offering if for some reason they had to. Our hope with doing that is that it reduces the need for individuals to disclose personal information to their employers, and that it just becomes part of a standard benefits package. It's no different than your professional services, your medical items, your drug benefits. It's just part of having coverage. When we began work on it, one of our other main goals was flexibility. We know that everyone's journey can be very different. So our product, it really includes two different benefits, two different codes. The first one is Foundation, which includes a list of procedures that are more surgical in nature. And then Focused, it provides coverage for services that aren't included in any provincial plan. So you could, an employer or an organization can add one or both. It was important that we wanted to reduce barriers wherever possible. We've learned that their barriers are so common in the health industry. So what we wanted to do was do away with lengthy authorization forms, and this benefit is only if it's eligible on your plan. All you require is a prescription with a diagnosis. We wanted to try and just scale back on all of the paperwork and red tape that comes along with a lot of benefits, especially when this community already has to face so many additional obstacles and barriers in their health journey. We're so proud of the offering. I'm so excited that I was given the opportunity to discuss it here today. So thank you for asking.
No, that's wonderful. And I imagine that was there some nervousness or fear involved in putting this together, and anything else you'd want to share from an emotional perspective? 'Cause I know that Ingrid will have a lot to share about programs and adjusting to sort of different needs that a diverse workplace has. But you've really helped us kick this off with something that I think we have a lot less, at least certainly I do, less familiarity with. And so, how do you help to bring some of the emotion in for your community? Was that part of the program, or is that something that's a continuous part of rolling something like this out?
It's absolutely continuous, but there was an emotional piece to it. I myself, as a member of the LGBTQ plus community, it was important to me that we did this the right way, and that we did this for the community and not for us. We wanted to make sure that we were hearing what people had to say, and we were involving the community in our research. We had focus groups with our largest plan sponsor. We spoke to smaller organizations and large organizations like WPATH and CPATH. We wanted to really ingrain ourselves and make sure that this wasn't just a benefit we're building. This was a cultural shift where we have gone through additional training. We have added pronouns and emails. We've really taken it upon ourselves to educate ourselves, because we got to that point where we really realized we didn't know what we didn't know. And the only way to find that out is by actually speaking to people who are in the community and doing that listening that we've all talked about. And I will say it was nerve-wracking to be in that first meeting room and suggest it and discuss it. I feel like so many people have pause with talking about topics that they may not feel educated enough to discuss. So there was a touch of nerves to kind of start saying, how do we do this?
Mm-hmm. I absolutely love how you've characterized that, and the deepness with which you talk about the emotion. I think that's so important that we often forget in our workplace, that the emotion of these initiatives is so powerful, and the listening. And Ingrid, does that resonate with you in some of the things that you've been involved in?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Allison, for sharing that and starting us off. You know, in the HR and benefits world in particular, we tend to sit in this little box, and it's easier to make products and programs that fit everybody in that box. It's easier to manage. And as the world has changed around us and people are being more open about their needs and requirements, we realize that the the benefit programs are not diverse enough for all the cultures and communities and their families and the different types of families. But to understand that, where Allison and Green Shield started was the right place, asking the community, building common ground, and including them in the process and understanding their needs rather than just going off and building a program. Because we're very reactive. We have a tendency to hear something is happening, and then in the world around us, and then decide we're going to go and we're going to do this, and just hit one trend. The challenge that we're seeing is in Canada in particular, we're not as open about the communities that we're in unless you're visible. So to John's point, the invisible disabilities, or being part of the 2S LGBTQ plus community, and then you're afraid of the stigma if you speak up, right? So I love that Allison said that it's become embedded in the program, so you don't have to per se self-identify. So that again builds trust, right? And the employee focus groups is just huge. So asking the question very differently. So asking if the benefit program is good is very, very different from asking if the benefit program is meeting the needs of yourself and your family. You're going to get a very, very different response. So we need to change the way we start asking questions, and doing employee engagement. We really need to focus on the cultural assessments and understand that there's different cultures and different needs in every organization that you can't see. There's so many intersectionalities. If you're a woman, if you're from the LGBTQ plus community, all sorts of different intersectionalities that we can't assume. So I just loved where Allison and her team started. So thank you.
Yeah, and you said something really interesting to me around asking, and the notion of asking and asking for help, and this sense that, talking about focus groups, you both mentioned that feedback loop. And I'm wondering, Anna, who's helping you on this journey, and how does that work for you? Does that make sense? This notion of asking, is that core to what you're doing, or how do you perceive that?
For sure. I think, Allison, something you said really resonated, is that we didn't know what we didn't know. And historically, we really didn't make the effort to collect the data. And when we revamped our approach to DE&I at Pelmerex, that was the first thing that we did, is realizing that we don't have the internal expertise. Historically, DE&I has been really just one of celebration and events, and we wanted to get past that. And we really wanted to get into awareness, and biases and systemic discrimination and biases. And so we partnered with an external firm that specializes in this area. And the very first thing that we did was collect data. And we collected data on the firm's platform because we really wanted to create this notion of confidentiality and create an environment where employees could really be safe and in sharing their demographics with us. And so that was our first step. And having a partner who really is an expert in this is game changing, because we don't have internal experts. With their help, we use the data and put together a strategy and a roadmap. I also really believe that HR doesn't own this. This is really an organizational wide initiative if you're going to make a difference and if you're going to get the traction that you need. So we put out a call to volunteers. We had an application process for those volunteers. And now we have a group of about 50 employees across the organization, from all levels, all backgrounds, all kinds of lived experiences. And the CEO and myself are the executive sponsors of this project, but really the people doing the work, creating the momentum, being the ambassadors, is this group of employees that are super passionate about making a difference, and they have the ability to make an impact with their peers at a much higher and more meaningful level than an HR team does, because it's not seen as another HR program or an HR initiative. And so I'm so proud of this team. I'm so proud of the work that they're doing. They're so engaged. They challenge us. The trust is being built, and we're creating such an amazingly strong foundation for this tough work, because it is really tough work, but super meaningful when you do it right.
It sure is really tough work. And John, I know that you had shared that some of us were lucky enough to have some conversation, and there's things that I think that when we do feel at times there's success, often in panels like this, we really talk about the heavy lifting that has to be done. But I think it's also very inspirational to talk about things we might be proud of, successes we've had. And I think, Anna, you've set us on that path of there's things that we can celebrate. Um, are there any things that come to mind for you, John, on successes that you've been part of, or organizations you've been involved in, that you could point out that you'd be considered, that you'd be proud of, that are the direction that we want to think about as we proceed with these initiatives? Wait, I think we're having a sound. Is it only me that has sound? Can everybody hear John? It's just me?
Sorry,
No.
that was my bad.
Oh, don't
I put
scare
my
me,
mute
John.
on.
John, you're scaring me. I'm gonna have a heart attack. I was already coughing. I had a nervous cough. You're scaring me. All right, try that again. Now that my blood pressure is going back down.
It would be absolutely awful if somebody had an infarction right here on the panel. As I was starting to say, I was very fortunate as part of my own personal journey, my own coming to grips with what it was that I had to do in order to stay in my career, in order to be able to do the things that I knew I was capable of doing. Uh, I needed to be able to share with others a little bit more about myself. And that is a very big step. That's one of the hardest things to get past initially. I was fortunate that about 13, 14 years ago, I wound up moving into an organization where effectively DEI, as it were, has been built into their DNA for almost 80 years. Seriously, a long, long time. I mean, it started back in 1942. 1942, the organization was bringing all of their top performing leaders together for a conference. And they had essentially booked out a conference center, hotel, to make all this happen and to celebrate and talk about what were going to be the new initiatives that the organization was going to take on a go-forward basis. The unfortunate thing that happened was that because one of those participants was a visible minority, specifically an African American, he was denied entrance into the event by the venue itself. They said, oh, sorry, we don't allow people of color. Actually, they were a little more blunt than that, I assume, at the time, but we don't allow people like you to come in here. All right. The president of the organization got wind of that and immediately canceled that event at that particular venue. He said, there's no way that we're going to be excluding this person. All right. He was able to find and secure another venue not too far away that allowed for everybody to participate and contribute and be a part of that celebration. All right. After that particular event, he went to the head of the personnel department, as HR was called back in those days. All right. He went to the head of the personnel department and basically issued an edict that under no circumstances was anybody to be excluded on the basis of color of their skin, racial background, culture, gender. or religious belief. We want to hire the best people, and we will judge them solely on the merits of their performance, their capabilities, not the way they look, not the way they sound. All right. And that was, as I said, 1942. That has been a story that has been literally, when I walked in the door of that organization, it was one of the first stories that was shared with me. It was a point of pride that was clearly evident to everybody in the organization because it's been a part of the culture for so long. It's embedded into everything that they do, everything that they create in terms of policies, procedures, processes, vendor management, vendor selection, all of those things. It's been recognized, the organization has been recognized multiple times as a great place to work, as a diverse employer. Uh, I don't know how many times, all right? And that's the kind of organization that basically allowed me to start to feel more comfortable in my own skin about some of the challenges that I had. Enough so that when I did eventually move on from that organization, I decided I wasn't going to go back and closet myself, so to speak, with respect to my disability. I was going to point it out right away. This is what it needs to be. All right. And if you want to be able to work with me, this is some of the things that we have to establish. And I was really, really pleased that my current employer listened, heard me, and immediately took steps to accommodate. And I like to believe that I'm doing well where I am right now, and I'm influencing others as well. I've had a number of people approach me over the course of my time here and said, really inspired by your bravery. And I wanted you to know that, I have this type of particular issue and I'm looking for these types of accommodations. I've had no idea who to talk to or how to talk to somebody. In many instances, all of this is going to be predicated off of these small individual journeys over us being able to share things with one another. We can build policies. We can have, round tables and panels like this. Um, It'll have a great effect of having us understand our various levels of unconscious bias. But the real truth is going to be coming out when we have these opportunities to share personally with one another, to empathize with one another. Because when both parties are able to feel, we're going to be able to make those changes. We're going to make lasting changes, and they will become intrinsic to who we are, as opposed to something that we're made to do. It's just something we will do. And that's a big, big difference in terms of what we want to try and accomplish, I think, on a go-forward basis. We're on that journey. And so long as we continue to share these types of stories and people are going to be empathetic and open towards it, we'll get to where we want to go.
It's so incredibly powerful, and personally, obviously for me too, John, very powerful. I have shared some of those experiences. I'm not walking with a cane right now, which is a whole other story, but for 15 years I walked with a cane and got a lot of, were you in a car accident? Did you fall off a horse? I mean, things that I thought, wow, I didn't know you would have a cane after a car accident. And it took a long time for me to admit, no, I have multiple sclerosis, and particularly at a senior level, where people then said, well, then you're going to be the girl with multiple sclerosis. And the courage that it takes to acknowledge a community you come from, some aspect of your personal life that opens you up to be what we talk about, bring your authentic self to work. I think what you said, John, is incredibly powerful. And I wanted to shift gears here now that John has really set the stage for us this way, and ask all of you, and you can give this in the context of the work you do or your own personal experience in some way, but how would you advise in the workplace? One of the questions I used to receive a lot is, should I disclose my disability? So as professionals that are creating programs, and I mean, I have no answer for that. I'll be honest with you. I always, I get this question. I've been on panels, got the question. People call me and ask me. I'd like to know, as HR professionals, How do you interpret that? So John has given us his personal view. What are your thoughts as people that are really dedicating and devoting so much heart and employee sweat of yours and your teams to producing programs and policies and initiatives? How would you help someone to determine whether or not they disclose, and what sort of things would you just suggest? And you can also use programs you currently have or you've been involved in that may have shifted your mind on that. But how would you help someone to engage with some of these initiatives and be a little more comfortable to share, as John just so beautifully did with us? Any thoughts on that? Any of you? Maybe Anna?
Sure, I'm happy to jump in. I mean, what I will say and set kind of the context first is what I've learned is we're all at different junctions on this journey. And, for one, we're doing a lot of education at Pelmorex right now, and we made a conscious effort not to make any of that mandatory, because we really want to meet people where they are in their journey. And so I think it really depends on, and I don't like to speak for anybody. I think it takes a lot of courage and bravery. And John, I applaud you and you as well. Um, but I don't think it's one answer for everybody. I think it depends on where you are in your own journey. I think it depends on the signals your organization is giving in terms of inclusion. I think it depends on the trust that you have with your leader, and the trust that you have in your organization, again, with the inclusion. And that's why I think at Palmerex, it's super important that we've parked diversity temporarily and really focusing on inclusion and equity. So, what are we doing so that people can bring their authentic selves? What are the messages that we're sending out to our employees in our actions, not just in policies and programs, and talking about it, but when it really matters, how do we show up? As well as equity. What are we doing to make sure everybody has exactly what they need to be successful and to be able to be their authentic selves? So it sounds like a cop out. I apologize, but I don't think there's one answer. I think it just depends on your own personal journey and where your organization and what your organization is doing to signal inclusion and embracing those conversations.
And does anybody want to jump in and add something? Like, I mean, how do we hold ourselves accountable? Ingrid?
Yeah, so I agree with Anna. So for me personally, diversity already exists. If we look around, we're diverse. There's lots of intersectionalities, etc. Really, to start moving it forward is that inclusion piece. And then the equity is the programs and the benefits. When it takes care of everybody, then you have equity. But to get to that point, you have to hold space. The organization has to be open. And I agree with Anna. The leaders have to set the tone. It's got to be authentic. It's got to be that courageous sharing that John has done. Setting that tone, not just HR, but the entire leadership piece. So, and it has to resonate through everything you do, not just the big programs, but if you have one individual come forward to a leader with a situation that they need help with, there may be other people out there with the same situations. It's very, very important to to look at everything you're doing from an inclusive lens, and then start building that trust, and people will start moving that forward. And any messaging you do. So if a leader is saying, let's walk this way, but then the messaging in the organization and the prints and the ads or anything else doesn't resonate, then it's not going to ripple through the organization. So that's really, really important.
How does that resonate with your experience, Ingrid? Like, is that something that you'd say you've experienced as an employee? That it with your places, I mean, as a leader and as somebody that's doing that, would you say that it's something that you personally have experienced, or is it something that inclusion now it's newer in a way?
It's very new. And working in the past 2 years with several organizations, it's exactly what Anna says. They're in a different place in their journey. And
Mm-hmm.
often when they come to the table, it's really, we want to get to diversity, inclusion, and equity, but we don't know how, right? And then when you start having those conversations, it gets very uncomfortable because it's like, not just that you have to spend money, but where you want us to go is going to be very challenging for us to do, right? So, in my journey as head of HR and diversity, I've had the opportunity to start helping leaders filter that through the organization. But, you know, you have to have a voice and you have to have sponsorship, right? If me as a black person, a black woman, that could be challenging, right? And having my own battle climbing up the ladder without a sponsor and a leadership team that wants to move that forward. So it varies depending on which organization I've been. I've been lucky over the years to work for organizations that have allowed inclusivity and equity to have a platform. But I see lots of organizations who are struggling with that because it's a huge shift, and it's going to mean structural change within teams, within the organization, and within the programs that they now roll out. But ESG and societal needs are becoming so huge now that that push from outside is not slowing down, it's rolling us along. So we have to move it forward, and that means
I love that.
accountability.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love that accountability. And this is sort of a business critical now.
Yep.
So, I mean, I know we're all of a tenure that we've been in the workplace long enough to have experienced a few rotations. Certainly, this is now a business critical, not a side opportunity. This is a core opportunity. The way you articulated, and having a voice and sponsorship is something that I imagine, Allison, you must have had to have for some of the things you shared. Can you talk a little bit about your thoughts on this? I mean, this is very meaty. This is very critical.
Absolutely. I'm very happy to speak on it. One of the big takeaways and one of the things that I've learned from my organization that has made it so great for me is that we're not afraid to ask. And I feel that so often companies and individuals run off of these assumptions, and they don't ask people what they need or what they want or what they're comfortable with. And we do it every day in our language where we assume things about people, whether it be the way that we speak, and we use language that's exclusive, and we just don't realize we speak in a very gendered manner, and we speak in a very like putting things on people. And what I've been very lucky is I have a very supportive leadership. And even most recently, you asked about programs or things I've been involved in, is our HR leadership wasn't afraid, and they took a risk, and they asked me point blank if I would be comfortable sharing some of my personal experiences so their team could better understand um, my view as a member of the LGBTQ plus community. um, I'm not somebody who would typically have volunteered that. So the fact that they asked me, it gave me such a sense of welcomeness, and I was happy to share, and it made me feel more comfortable in my workspace with my peers, with my colleagues, and it showed me that I work for a company who's so willing to learn and ask and take that step. And
Can I
I just
ask something here? Do we
Yeah.
all agree, just with a show of hands, because this is so, virtual things are, I'm a very sort of let's all be in the same room kind of person. But what you just said, Allison, do we all agree that being asked to share something, being asked to participate is welcome? Is that something that we would say is somewhat universally welcome from an inclusion perspective? Okay, we're all
It
sort of nodding. I
it
don't, I want,
depends. It
yeah.
depends how you ask, right?
Okay.
And
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
and to Allison's point, it sounds like like there was a relationship between her and HR that
Mm-hmm.
was already there. So you have to start from a place of common ground, because what we've seen over the last year is, oh, something happened to Black people. Let's go out, ask all the Black people in the building, how they're reacting to it, which is can be very traumatic, right?
Mm.
DEI is a very traumatic space to work in. So it's kind of like just reaching out and, how are you doing today? Do you want to do virtual coffee, and building a relationship to a point where, you don't have to share everything, but you create this common ground that you can ask that question. And, for me, I always start from the history. So if I'm going to help, I need to understand the history. So before you reach out and ask that question, go and learn about the history. Go and understand the impact on the indigenous communities.
Mhm.
Understand the community that you're asking about, the Black community, and then you're approaching from an educated place to ask a question. So
So I love the way that you're saying that, and I giggled because I recently had a friend. I'm a dual citizen, so I also live in the U.S. and I had a friend who said, "I'm so tired of being the Black spokesperson at my company." And we kind of laughed because it is easy to become the disabled representative, Black spokesperson, LGBTQ plus representative, and you're one individual that identifies with the community, but you may not be representative of the entire community. And so how do we think that right now that type of inclusion and that asking is being done? How successful do you think people are? Because there is a nervousness. I think you made a great point, Ingrid, that get some education. So here I am, a white woman. Let's say I don't understand something. Should I say, "Hey, you know what, Ingrid, I don't really understand this. Where would you direct me?" Or do I look for that on my own? What counsel would you have for people? And I can say this, in any regard that anyone has, how should somebody do that?
okay, both of that. So that was excellent. Ask where I can get information, not just assume that you're going to give me that information. And yeah, and then asking if you will assist me. I think that's really, really important. I mean, for communities like the indigenous community who don't self-identify very readily, um, this has been a very traumatic journey for them, with the bodies being found and the history of the residential schools now being front and center. They're a community that doesn't often reach out and ask for help, but now they're asking, right? And we have to be careful how we approach them to give that help and support. And it may have just been, the marches last week, just quietly walking with them. Sometimes that's all people want, that reflection and that respect. So, you really have to understand the person you're approaching and where your relationship is with that person before you ask those questions, and always educating yourself. There's so much on social media now. You just need to find the correct information and move it forward. So great question.
That's beautiful because I think Anthony also said, create space for people to feel. And what you've just said is really essentially, even in the workplace, there is room to create that space to feel. But there is a courage, and I think you've all indicated that there's a courage. You mentioned something else that I think will just take us as we've got about 10, 15 minutes left. And I hope that we could shift gears into something that I'm personally, very interested in understanding your point of view, which is mental health, and what sort of programs that you may have been working on, and your perspective on, in this post-COVID environment, and in some cases still people wrestling with things, with all the issues that are coming up around social consciousness that may have coupled into already times where we're feeling very uneasy. How are mental health programs shifting to help support employees and communities? And also something that was mentioned earlier, risk tolerance. So those that may not want to be vaccinated, individuals that may feel uncomfortable to leave the home work environment to rejoin physical spaces. There are all these things that now are inclusion based in my mind, and please correct me if you disagree, But these to me are new aspects of inclusion based on proximity, on are you vaccinated? You know, I returned to Canada yesterday to share something, and it was quite an experience to, you know, return as a Canadian with my passport. The number of times I was stopped and asked very unusual questions in the middle of the baggage area by customs officials. You know, and so it's a very different environment and could be very off-putting. How are we helping people from the mental health perspective? And could you each comment on if things have changed? Have they intensified? Are they different? Are they the same? How should we think about this aspect? Maybe we can start with John.
Lucky me.
See, I think you at the best times, don't I?
You do. The interesting thing that I find is that, you know, mental health has always been a concern for, I think, for anybody who's suffering. It's something that they just have no idea as to, or they've had limited opportunity and idea as to where they can go to obtain help and assistance. And often, I'll come back and use the term again, fear is going to hold them back from seeking things out actively. All right. What we're seeing now is a shift where instead of them having to actively seek things out, organizations, society as a whole is starting to acknowledge the fact that these types of issues exist. It's pervasive. And many people have these challenges. It's not necessarily something that you could identify by pointing and looking at somebody. It's something that's very pervasive. It could be the person next to you. It could be your family member, and you won't necessarily know. So the way that we're starting to communicate this overall is changing. We're just putting the information out there and saying, look, this is available. These resources, these tools are available. And we actively encourage people who need it to look into it. But more importantly, we think it's also important that if you believe that you know others who could benefit from these, we encourage you to let them know about this. All right? It's not just a matter of seeking it for yourself, but you start the opportunity to create dialogues by letting others feel empowered that you can share this information with others. And it's that sharing that's important, because sharing starts to build trust. And fundamental to all of the things that we're talking about, trust is absolutely key. We're never going to be able to move this bar if we don't start to build a strong sense of trust. All right. If I were to take off all of the DEI pieces and simply speak about things like team building, if you will, in HR, we've been talking about building really strong, high performing teams. And in order to build those types of teams, fundamental to all of that has always been the need to have trust between the members of the teams. All right. Now we're simply saying this needs to be a pervasive type of a thing. It cannot be just something that's specific to a particular project team, a specific department, a specific organization. It's something that we need to build overall. And that's where we're going to start to go if we start to open up these opportunities for people to start saying, these are resources, these can help you. I want to be able to make sure that you have the help. And you're going to trust me a little bit more because I brought this to your attention. And I didn't do that for any type of reward or recognition. I did it because I care. I did it because I want to help. That's in it for me. That's the important thing for me. I want to help. And if we can start to take more of that and share more of that, this journey is going to be a much more successful one, much, much faster.
Sorry, if I could just jump in. I think that what I would add, John, to what you're saying is share our own stories, right? Because that creates safety. Like, one of the things that I do with my team often is I tell them, I'm like, I've hit a wall. I'm canceling my meetings this afternoon and I'm going for a walk. I'm dealing with aging parents that have challenges, 2 kids at home. It's a lot. I'm feeling really overwhelmed. And our CEO does a really good job of doing that as well in our weekly all hands with the whole company. So I think it's for sure bringing these resources to people, but as using my privilege as a white woman to make it okay and shatter the stigma and talk about it openly, and senior leadership to do that, because then it does create that trust and it does create the message of this is going to be okay.
And that's interesting that you say about sharing. I'm going for a walk, because there's a perception often that you as the leader are impermeable, impenetrable. You can deal with everything and everybody else is unraveling. We're all unraveling at some point. I loved how you used the word help, John. I care and I want to help. These are fundamental human condition needs that we all experience. There's no one that doesn't have a need for help or care. And I would love to hear, Allison, what that brings up for you.
Yes, I really resonated with what John was saying. It really stuck with me. And I think a big piece of mental health is understanding it looks different on everybody. It's not always the same blanket brush of, sleeping in, not getting out of bed. Oh, that's depression. Oh, they don't like, everybody just wants to box and categorize things, but it looks so different. And even when it comes to getting that help, everybody has those different needs. And I know some different acquisitions we've made at Green Shield and some different tools we've made available. Like, mental health being accessible virtually is a very real thing, not just because of the pandemic, but some people find help in texting with the therapist, having it via FaceTime, having them accessible in different means really helps to speak to the different issues people are facing, and being aware of that and not, passing judgment on, well, that's, therapy is not going to help. You need this. Like, that's everybody's version, and everybody's struggle is their own, and let them have that and offer the help that they need. Um, I think that's a big change that we've seen in this past, pandemic block of time, where we've all seen that it affects everybody differently, and all the help that you need is also very different. And you shouldn't pass judgment on how somebody else is handling it. If somebody doesn't want to, they've been cooped up for a year, you can't assume that they now want to go out and socialize on a patio just because you can. That might be a real strain for them. And I think that level of understanding, that trust, and saying, are you comfortable going out for a patio, or would you like to have a virtual catch up?
Mhm.
Or those asking, making it comfortable for people is the step in the right direction.
I think that making it comfortable for people is so core. And I have found myself with a lot of new language saying, well, if you're comfortable to have a coffee in person, or if you'd like virtually, or if you're tired of looking at me on the camera, I'm very happy to go the old fashioned way and just speak on the phone. So, I mean, I think that we've now fatigued ourselves differently. Certainly in Chicago, where I live, I can tell you that everything opened up a month ago, and it's been a very big adjustment to run from breakfast meeting to this meeting to lunch meeting to here. And I questioned, how did we ever do this before at this pace? Do you feel that the concept, as people are rethinking return to work and the combination of things, is that going to be more difficult from a mental health perspective? Are there new challenges that you as HR professionals feel managers, leaders, and others within the industry should be thinking about? I personally have a therapist. I love my therapist. I'm very happy to share that I find it very beneficial, and it's helped me in so many different ways that I wouldn't have appreciated. Is that now something in companies that is becoming a little more common, that people are sharing the ways in which they're getting the care and help that John mentioned? How is that shifted? What should people think about right now as we sort of wrap?
So I think that's important. I just started a role with Walmart Canada. I think it's day 8 or 9, and the the reason I took the job was one question. One question Nabila asked me, so how do you deal with all the trauma? How do you take care of yourself? And that was huge because employers don't ask that, right? So I realized I was coming into an organization that's important. And more importantly, all these comments about the new norm, returning to work, people, there is no norm. We are not going back to norm. There's so many things that have changed. People are going to make um, decisions that include self-care about who they work for, how they work, what they do. I mean, I love that piece about the, going to the patio, because as soon as they left it and said, oh, Ingrid, Derek, do you want to meet us on the patio? I had anxiety attacks. Oh, no, I am not coming. Right. So, so I'm having anxiety attacks walking down the street right now because 15 months we haven't been doing that. So that shift for me and what it's going to look like, I know there's other people that are feeling that. So, for HR and for employers, we can't just assume that, that phrase returns to work it needs to go away, because it's a different shift. It's how we moving forward, and and what are we going to provide to individuals. And first of all, I think the EAP programs, the wellness programs, they need to be central to the benefit programs that we were traditionally giving. If you put the EAP programs and all those other programs out there first as the core, then you'll start to see the shift that the health benefits may not be impacted as much, because you are getting to people before it becomes a physical issue or a mental issue, because you're dealing with that self-care. So, and the only way to do that is build trust. Why are we as an organization putting this out there, saying that self-care comes first? And then it needs to be through the message, like, no meetings on Wednesday, no meetings after a certain time on Friday, when you send emails, when you set up meetings. And you don't need to do Zoom calls all the time. That was perfect. Can we do a call instead, right? So I have an invisible disability. I have very, very bad migraine. And I thought I had it under control until 15 months ago when we went into video land. So now I've had to go back and get my migraine medication started up again, because it's just challenging to do all those video sessions all the time. So, how do we resonate, and how do we move that forward? How do we orient people in this video world around us, and how the gig economy is starting to build around us, that we're hiring people all across the world now. So this is not the same world anymore. So I think it's really important to understand.
Yeah, and I know we're coming up against time. I'm looking to see if we have a few more minutes. There's something that you've all said that has really stuck with me, and as we sort of come to our conclusion here, in a company, it is really about we join a group, we become part of something. It seems that there's a lot more me in the we now, and what I've heard is that serving the me will strengthen the we. And there's so much that you've all said that really hits, me here, knowing how much it's important that we are part of a collective, our individual requirements now, and the need to be cared for and helped, as John so simply and eloquently put it, seems to be at the core of all of the initiatives that you have all helped to guide and deliver and support. The idea of being heard and sponsored, listening reflectively, and asking people for help in a way that is inclusive and thoughtful are takeaways that I know I will be reflecting on. And I really do appreciate everything that you contributed today, both personally and from your professional experience. Thank you so much. I don't know if anyone has any final parting statements they'd like to make, but thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. It was absolutely my sincere pleasure to spend this time with you, and I've learned so very much. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. It's
Thank
been
you
a
so
pleasure
much.
sharing this with you all.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care.
There
Hear
you
me?
are. Yes, we can hear you.
Okay.
All right, amazing.
Yeah.
All right,
So
well.
Yep.
Thank you, everyone, for being so patient. I will